There comes a moment in life when you look around and you don't recognize anything. Not the people around you, not the places you're in, not even yourself. It's as if you were a guest at a party you were never invited to. Everyone else seems to know how to dance, laugh, dress, speak effortlessly, and you're just there, pretending to fit in, while inside you wonder if the problem is you. You've told yourself more times than you can count, I don't belong here. I don't fit in with these people. Maybe I was never supposed to be here. And the worst part isn't feeling out of place. The worst part is starting to believe something is wrong with you for feeling that way. Because while others seem to have their tribe, their path, their role in the world, you walk without a map, without certainty, carrying an uncomfortable silence inside that no one seems to notice. Maybe you grew up surrounded by people and still always felt alone. Maybe you have family, friends, a partner, and still something is missing. Something you can't quite put into words, but feels like a crack in your soul. And here comes the truth no one ever told you. You're not alone in feeling this way. This feeling of not belonging, of not fitting in, is more common than you think. But few admit it. Because we live in a world that rewards those who adapt, those who blend in, those who follow the current without question. And if you're someone who has questioned everything, if you've ever felt like this world wasn't made for you, this Stoic session is for you. Because today we're going to talk about the art of not fitting in, the power of being different, how Stoicism can help you turn that feeling of exclusion into an unstoppable force of authenticity. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." What if that voice telling you you don't fit in isn't the truth, but just an opinion you've learned to believe? What if you're not broken, but simply awake in a world still asleep? Today, we're not going to look for a magic recipe to help you adapt. We're not going to disguise your essence to make it fit into someone else's mold. We're going to do something much deeper and braver. We're going to help you understand why you feel this way and how to use that pain as a guide back to yourself. Because sometimes not fitting in isn't a curse. It's a sign that you were meant to walk a different path. Maybe you don't fit in because your soul came to challenge the status quo. Maybe you don't fit in because your gaze is too honest, your heart too sensitive, your values too strong for a world that has normalized the superficial. Maybe you don't fit in because you didn't come to belong, but to awaken. And if that's the case, you're not lost. You're exactly where you need to be, in the midst of a silent transformation, in a stage where you'll finally stop seeking outside, the acceptance that only you can give yourself. But to do that, you have to resist the urge to disguise yourself. You have to withstand the discomfort of feeling alone. You have to look inward with courage. Stoicism doesn't promise easy comfort, but it does offer a truth that sets you free. Your worth doesn't depend on how many understand you, but on how true you are to what you know you are. So stay, because in this session, we're going to walk this path together, not so you stop feeling different, but so you start honoring it. It's a rebellious act against a world that taught you to be ashamed of your authenticity. It's your way of saying to the universe, I'm here, and even if I don't fit in, I won't lose myself just to please others. Are you ready? Then take a deep breath, because what comes next isn't a class, nor a formula. It's a journey into the most honest part of you. Welcome. Here, you don't need to fit in, you only need to be. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by leaving this comment. From today on, I embrace my difference with dignity. That phrase will be your reminder that you're not here to force yourself to fit in, but to honor your authenticity. This is the moment to free yourself from the need for approval and build a place where you can be you without masks or guilt. Today you choose to walk with purpose, even if the path is lonely. Without further delay, let's begin. First lesson, accept that not fitting in is also freedom. From a very young age, we're taught to fit in, to behave a certain way, to speak in a certain tone, to dress how the group dictates, to laugh only when it's socially acceptable. We're trained, without it ever being said out loud, to survive inside someone else's molds, and so, almost without realizing it, we confuse belonging with worth, acceptance with identity, crowds with home. But there comes a moment, for some sooner, for others, when the soul is already weary, when that sensation becomes unbearable. You're surrounded by people, and yet you feel invisible. You take part in conversations, and yet you feel fake. You do everything the right way, and still, you don't feel at home. You don't fit in, and the first thing that comes is judgment. What's wrong with me? Why am I like this? Mainstream culture tends to tell you that the problem is you, that you're the one who needs to change, that your way of thinking, your sensitivity, your silence, your intensity, your strangeness, all of that is too much. Too much for a world that values what's predictable, simple, easily labeled without discomfort. But this is where Stoicism shines a powerful light on your soul. Not fitting in is not a flaw. It's the first sign that you've awakened, and that awakening, even if it hurts, is a privilege not everyone dares to live. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the known world, had the power to fit into any circle, but he chose a different path, the path of introspective thought, of inner silence, of personal virtue. In his meditations, he doesn't try to please anyone. He seeks to be just, firm, serene. He knew that fitting into an empire sick with superficiality was no achievement. It was a way to lose oneself. The freedom of not fitting in lies in this, in no longer asking for permission to exist, in realizing you don't need the approval of those who don't understand you, in recognizing that forcing yourself to fit where there's no room for your truth only distorts you, and that the pain of authentic solitude is preferable to the comfort of an empty belonging. The wise Stoic doesn't seek crowds. He seeks coherence. And coherence will sometimes make you a stranger among your own, but it also gives you a strength no one can take from you, the strength to inhabit yourself without shame. Ask yourself right now, how many times have you pretended just to be accepted? How many times have you betrayed your ideas just so you wouldn't be the weird one in the group? How many times have you silenced what you knew was true for fear of making others uncomfortable? Freedom begins when you stop paying that price, when you understand that being different is not the same as being wrong. That authenticity has a cost, yes, but also a massive reward, the peace of seeing your reflection without guilt. Most people live adapted, not fulfilled. And there's a big difference between someone who lives trying to fit in and someone who lives trying to be true. The first is always indebted to others. The second answers only to their conscience. The Stoic chooses the latter. He chooses discomfort if it means being honest. He chooses solitude if it means no longer lying to himself. And in that difficult choice, true freedom is born. The kind that doesn't depend on groups, trends, likes, or social validation. Not fitting in is also a sign that you're not meant to follow the path others traced out of fear, but that you're ready to build your own way, at your pace, with your values, from your truth. Of course, there will be moments of doubt. Of course, you'll sometimes wish it were easier to belong. But if you've made it this far, if you've felt that sensation of not fitting in anywhere, let me tell you something. Maybe you don't fit in because you were born to create a new place. A place where depth doesn't scare people, where silence isn't uncomfortable, where thinking differently isn't ridiculed but respected. That place begins inside you, when you choose to stop begging to belong and begin to build from your authenticity, when instead of asking, "What do I need to change to be accepted?" you ask, "What do I need to strengthen to stay true to myself?" Not fitting in is not the end, it's the beginning of a life that's more honest, more grounded, more at peace. A Stoic life where your worth isn't dictated by the group, but by your virtue, where your path isn't marked by the crowd, but by your conscience, where your identity isn't rented out for approval, but honored with dignity. So the next time you feel out of place, don't run, Don't shrink, breathe, and observe, and remember. Not fitting in is also freedom. The freedom to be you, even if it means walking alone. Because deep down, that solitude isn't absence, it's space. Space to bloom into your deepest truth. And in that truth, you'll find something more valuable than any artificial belonging. Your own peace. The peace of someone who no longer needs to fit in, because they've chosen to walk their own path. Second lesson, you are not a mistake for being different. There's a silent question many carry for years without daring to say it out loud. What's wrong with me? It doesn't arise from calm self-reflection, but from the pain of feeling out of place again and again. Since childhood, you may have noticed that you thought differently, felt more intensely, or struggled to adapt to what seemed easy for others. Maybe you were quieter, more sensitive, more observant, more introspective, and without realizing it, that unique trait that made you special started to feel like a flaw. Because the world doesn't know how to handle difference, because most people fear what they don't understand. And you felt it in your skin. You were labeled as weird, complicated, intense, too much. They asked you to talk less, smile more, tone it down, stop overthinking, stop feeling so much, just be normal. And in the effort to fit in, to be accepted, you started to believe that your difference was a mistake, that something was wrong with you, that if others didn't accept you, you must be the one who was broken. But let me tell you something with the full force of Stoic philosophy. You are not broken, you are different, not defective. And that difference, far from being a curse, can become your greatest strength if you learn to honor it. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic sages, was a slave in Rome. Marginalized, ignored, considered less because of his condition. But he never allowed society's labels to define his worth. He didn't try to resemble the Romans to be accepted. He didn't soften his thinking to please the powerful. He chose to stand firm in his difference. And in that firmness he found an inner freedom no one could take from him. Because the wise do not seek to fit in, they seek to be virtuous, to act with justice, wisdom, and courage, even if it makes them outsiders, even if it means being misunderstood by the majority. Difference is not weakness, it's a sign of depth. The great minds in history, the ones who blazed trails, challenged norms, revolutionized ideas, they were all different, and they were all judged for it. So if you too feel that you don't fit in, that your sensitivity isolates you, that your worldview finds no echo, don't shrink. Don't dim your light to fit into dark rooms. Don't let the noise of the world drown out your inner voice. That discomfort you feel is not a sign of error. It's an invitation to build yourself from authenticity, not imitation. An invitation to develop your character, your thinking, your inner strength. To walk with your head held high, even if the road is lonely. Because there's something you only discover when you choose to be yourself, even when it hurts. The peace of not betraying yourself. And that peace is worth more than any shallow approval. Many live adapted to what society dictates. Few live in loyalty to their essence, and it is that loyalty that shapes the wise, the integrous, the ones who leave a mark. This is not about blind rebellion. It's not about going against everyone just for the sake of it. It's about living with purpose, with coherence, with virtue, even if it means being left out, even if it means being the different one. The Stoic does not fear difference. He embraces it. He cultivates it. He turns it into strength. So next time someone tells you you're too different, breathe, be thankful, and remember, you are not a mistake. You are a unique voice in a world of echoes, and the one who dares to be their own voice, even if they tremble, even if their feet bleed from walking alone. Plants something powerful in this world, the possibility that others might also dare to be who they truly are. You didn't come here to fit into someone else's mold. You came to create a new one where your truth has space, where your difference is welcome, where your soul can breathe without asking for permission. Yes, you are different, and that is a gift, one you are still learning to carry, one that might hurt, but can also transform. Because difference frightens the mediocre, but it inspires the brave. And you, though you may not feel it yet, are made to inspire, to lead by example, to live with dignity, to be a beacon in a sea of confusion. So keep walking, even if no one applauds, even if no one understands. Walk with the certainty that your difference is not a cross, it is a flame. And if you protect it, nourish it, honor it, one day others will find light in it. And when that happens, you'll understand that you were never a mistake. You were simply the exception meant to open a new path, one that is more real, more profound, more human. Feeling out of place doesn't mean you're broken, it only means you're ready to build an authentic path. If you've ever grown tired of pretending to belong, subscribing may seem like a small gesture, but to us, it means everything. It allows us to keep creating this refuge for souls who choose truth over approval. Here, you'll learn to be at peace with yourself, even when the world doesn't understand you. Your difference is not a burden, it is your strength. Third lesson, the soul does not need to belong in order to bloom. You don't have to be part of something to feel whole. That's a lie we were taught as children, that you need to fit in somewhere to be worthy. That if you're not surrounded by people, friends, a community, something is wrong with you. That if you don't have a group, a tribe, a space where everyone approves of you, then you're lost. But that's not true. The soul does not need to belong in order to bloom. It can bloom in the most barren desert of companionship, in the silence of an empty room, in the midst of rejection or misunderstanding. Because your inner greatness does not depend on your surroundings. It depends on your virtue, your coherence, your capacity to hold yourself up even when no one else will. Many of the great sages who marked history lived in solitude, or worse, in exile, in ridicule, in misunderstanding. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoics, wrote his deepest works not at the Roman banquet surrounded by applause, but in exile. They stripped him of power, silenced him, and he responded with wisdom. Because the wise don't need a place, they become their own refuge. Society screams at you that you must fit in, into a group, an ideology, a family, a social network, that you must have affinities, validation, followers. But if that requires you to disguise yourself, to mutilate your truth, to fake a joy you don't feel, or smile at those who secretly despise you, then you're not belonging, you're fleeing from yourself. There's a vast difference between feeling accompanied and feeling authentic. Many are surrounded by people and still feel lonelier than ever, because deep down they know they are not being themselves. They're performing a character to avoid rejection. They've reshaped themselves to belong, and in the process have become unrecognizable. That's not belonging, that's abandonment. The soul blooms when you stop performing, when you can sit with yourself without shame, when you walk without needing witnesses, when you think without needing approval, when your silence isn't absence, but home. You are not less for being alone. You are not inferior for not having an assigned place in this noisy society. You are not failing because you are not part of something. Maybe you're learning something more valuable. To be yourself, without labels, without protective walls, without masks to please. In a world obsessed with belonging, with standing out, with being part of a tribe that applauds you, choosing to bloom in silence is a radical act. It's an act of freedom, because when you dare to be with yourself without fleeing, you discover you are not empty. You discover your soul has roots, that your inner life is deeper than any outer belonging, that there is a universe within you waiting to be explored. Stoicism doesn't teach you to suppress the pain of feeling out of place. It teaches you to understand it, to transform it, to use it as fuel to strengthen your character. It's not easy, no one says it is, but when you understand that your worth doesn't depend on being accepted, something breaks inside, and something much stronger begins to rebuild, because you're no longer begging for spaces. You're building one of your own, and that place, even if it has few visitors, is sacred, because it is yours, because there you can breathe, because there you don't have to pretend. Sometimes life rips you from the groups where you faked belonging to force you to look within, to recognize that everything you seek outside already lives in you. Understanding, strength, worth, dignity. Society is not ready for all souls. Some are too deep to fit on the surface, too authentic to be understood by those who only know appearances. But that rarity is a blessing, because only when you realize you don't need to belong in order to bloom can you begin to truly live. You can stop seeking and start being. You can stop pleasing and start honoring your truth. And that, right there, is where real growth begins, where there are no labels to uphold, no roles to perform, where you can look in the mirror and see not lack, but possibility, where solitude is not a prison, but a workshop, where silence is not punishment, but prayer. Bloom there, even if no one sees it. Bloom without a stage, without an audience, without applause. Bloom because it is your nature. Because you are soul before you are membership. Because you are light before you are group. Because your existence does not need to be validated to be meaningful. The soul does not need to belong in order to bloom. It only needs to be faithful to itself. And that silent fidelity, invisible dignity, is what turns your life into a Stoic masterpiece. Firm, deep, authentic, and indestructible. Fourth lesson, not every tribe is meant for you. Perhaps the hardest truth to accept when you don't fit in is that some bonds were never meant for you. Not because you're not worthy, not because there's something wrong with you, but because not every soul resonates with yours, and that has nothing to do with your value. Sometimes you're simply in the wrong place. We insist on staying where there is no reciprocity. We insist on forcing conversations that die at birth, relationships where only one listens, bonds where you have to beg for respect. We stay in groups where our presence is more noticeable in absence than in essence. All because we don't want to face one uncomfortable truth. Not every tribe is meant for you. And that is not failure. It's liberation. There are circles where you can't breathe because surface level dominates everything, where connection is measured by shared memes, not comfortable silences, where thinking differently is seen as a problem, not a richness, where being deep is viewed as drama, not as a virtue. The Stoic sage does not seek to fit in, he seeks integrity. Seneca said it clearly, true friendship can only exist between good men. And what does that mean? That it's not enough to share time, stories, hobbies. You need virtue. You need truth. You need the freedom to be yourself without being punished for it. And that is rare. That's why you can't force it. When you surround yourself with those who aren't ready to receive your truth, you mutilate yourself. You stay silent so you don't make them uncomfortable. You laugh without joy so you don't get left out. You play dumb so you don't seem intense. And each day you feel further from yourself, even though you're surrounded by people. That's not belonging. That's self-exile. Maybe the discomfort you feel isn't loneliness. It's your soul whispering, this is not your place. And ignoring it will only make you sick with nostalgia for yourself. For that version of you that doesn't need to adapt to feel worthy. For that authenticity you now miss because it no longer knows where to live. Not every tribe is meant for you, and that's okay. Some bonds demand that you betray yourself just to stay. Circles built on superficiality. And you were not made for that. You came into this world to connect for real. To share from the soul, not behind a mask. Stoicism doesn't teach you to settle for what's there. It teaches you to let go of what doesn't resonate with you. To understand that inner peace is worth more than any group. And that if you have to betray yourself to be accepted, then you're not being loved. You're being tolerated. And you didn't come into this life to be tolerated. You came to be you. So start falling silent when no one listens. Walk away when you're not valued. Stop over-explaining when no one wants to understand. Stop begging for presence where your absence doesn't matter. The wise don't stay where their soul withers. They leave, not with resentment, but with dignity. And in that act of leaving, in that sober and courageous gesture, the true path to connection begins. Because by no longer insisting where there is no reciprocity, you make space for what is real to arrive. Not instantly, not always in the form you expected, but it arrives. The authentic can only find you when you stop hiding in the false, and then a new tribe appears, a quieter one, rarer, deeper. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply exists, and in it you can be yourself without asking for permission, without having to justify your intensity, without having to water down your depth, because there, finally, authenticity is not seen as a threat, but as a gift. But for that tribe to arrive, you must first let go of the false ones. Stop fighting for those who won't fight for you. Stop sitting where your soul has no space. Stop asking for understanding from those who live in denial. The Stoic path is lonely at first, because choosing yourself doesn't always bring immediate company. But with time, that solitude transforms. It becomes refuge. It becomes a beacon, and from there, others will see it. Others who also walked alone. Others who stopped forcing themselves to fit. Others who know that real connection begins when both can be fully themselves, without fear. So stop insisting where there is no peace. Stop begging where there is no reciprocity. Stop explaining yourself where no one wants to listen. And remember, not every tribe is meant for you. Only the ones that honor your truth. Only the ones that don't ask you to be less so they can feel like more. Only the ones that don't punish you for being you. Your soul knows. You just have to listen. Fifth lesson: chosen solitude is dignity, not sadness. There comes a moment in life when you realize you're surrounded by people, yet still feel alone. And it's not because there's silence around you, but because the noise you hear doesn't represent you, nourish you, or hold you. You talk, share, smile, but deep down, you know you're alone in your thoughts, in your values, in what you truly feel. And yes, that can hurt, but it can also be an opportunity, an invitation, a turning point. We live in a culture that has confused company with worth, acceptance with self-esteem, filling the schedule with filling the soul. We were taught that being alone equals failure, that if you don't belong to a group, something is broken in you, that if you prefer your silence over small talk, you must be depressed, that if you enjoy a quiet afternoon reading, thinking, or walking aimlessly, you're antisocial or strange. But what if you're not? What if you're just starting to find your own voice? Marcus Aurelius wrote alone, thought alone, reflected on life, virtue, and death from a place of deep intimacy. No one applauded him, no one fully understood him, yet there, in that inner dialogue, some of the most lucid thoughts in human history were born. Because true greatness is not always shouted, sometimes it's whispered in solitude. Being alone is not a sentence. It's a tool, a sacred space where you can listen to yourself without filters, where you can distinguish your true desires from those imposed upon you. It's in solitude that you stop being an echo and start becoming a voice, that you stop asking for permission to exist and start building yourself from essence. Many fear solitude because it forces them to look inward. It reveals what they've avoided with the noise of others, their fears, their emptiness, their disconnection. But Stoicism doesn't run from introspection. It seeks it, it embraces it, because it knows that only the one who dares to stay alone with themselves can build an authentic life. And that's where solitude stops being punishment and becomes choice. You no longer need others' validation to feel worthy. You no longer beg for attention as a substitute for self-love. You no longer fear spending a Friday night at home or eating a meal alone. You begin to distinguish physical solitude from emotional abandonment, and you discover that some relationships are far lonelier than being by yourself. Learning to be alone is one of the most revolutionary acts of our time. In an era where everyone competes for visibility, you choose selective invisibility. In a time where everyone has an opinion, you choose reflective silence. In a society terrified of slowing down, you sit with yourself and ask, what do I truly need? And that's where real power is born, because when you learn to enjoy your own company, you become free. You no longer accept emotional crumbs. You no longer adapt to spaces that don't respect you. You no longer pretend to be liked. You're with yourself, and that is enough. And interestingly, when you reach that state, different people start to show up. People who've walked through fire too, who've rebuilt themselves from within. And then connection is no longer about need. It becomes a choice. Stoicism doesn't propose isolation as a way of life, but it does propose inner strength as the foundation of any relationship. Seneca said, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than necessary." And many times we suffer in solitude, not because we are truly alone, but because we believe we shouldn't be, because we've been conditioned to think that we only have value when accompanied. And that belief is the true cause of suffering. Today you can start changing that narrative. You can transform how you view solitude, not as lack, but as path, not as failure, but as freedom, not as a permanent state, but as a sacred space where you gain strength to later share from fullness, not from need. Remember, chosen solitude is not sadness, it's dignity, it's maturity, it's the threshold of authenticity. Not everyone is prepared to walk with you on your inner journey, but as long as you're willing to walk with yourself, with love, patience, and truth, you will never be truly alone, because the one who learns to walk with themselves is never lost. Sixth lesson, your worth does not depend on being accepted. Since childhood, we were taught that being accepted means we're doing things right, that if we fit in, we're normal, that if we're applauded, we're worthy, that if we belong, we're on the right path. We were raised to chase the affection of others as if it were oxygen, and without realizing it, we began to confuse worth with validation. We started begging for approval as if it were nourishment, and little by little, we stopped asking who we truly are, to become what others wanted us to be. But there comes a moment in life when that strategy stops working. A moment when, no matter how much you smile, it's not enough. No matter how much you give in, you're not valued. No matter how hard you try to fit in, something inside you breaks, because you're betraying yourself, and no amount of external acceptance can compensate for the loss of your authenticity. In a world that rewards the superficial, the one who is deep makes others uncomfortable. In a world that idolizes image, the one who lives with integrity seems strange. If you feel like you don't fit in, it's not always because you're broken. Sometimes it's because you're too whole. Because while everyone else strives to appear, you strive to be, and that, even if it makes you feel lonely, is the right path. Stoicism reminds us that the only acceptance that truly matters is the one that comes from ourselves. Epictetus stated it firmly, "Do not seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish for events to happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly." The same applies to how others see you. Don't live waiting for the world's applause. Live in a way that keeps your soul at peace. Because peace doesn't come from external approval, but from internal coherence. When you strive to be accepted at any cost, you hand over your dignity on a silver platter. When you alter your behavior, your ideas, or your appearance to please people who don't even know your essence, you're mortgaging your freedom. How many times have you kept quiet out of fear of judgment? How many times have you remained in draining social circles out of fear of being alone? How many times have you pretended to be someone else, just to not feel out of place? But what you ignore is that every time you hide yourself, you lose a piece of your power. True respect is not earned by giving in, but by standing firm in your beliefs, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Authentic self-esteem is not built from the number of followers or friends or compliments, but from your ability to look in the mirror and know that you did not betray yourself. Not fitting in is not a flaw, it's a filter, a call to remember that not every space is for you, and that doesn't make you less. On the contrary, it gives you the opportunity to create a space where you don't have to sacrifice your soul to belong, where your uniqueness is not a cause for mockery, but for admiration, where your voice doesn't have to be silenced, but is heard. Marcus Aurelius understood this in his role as emperor. Surrounded by flatterers, falsehoods, and protocols, he chose to cultivate his soul in solitude. He wrote for himself, not for the world. He didn't need to be understood by everyone, just by himself. And you can do the same. You can stop searching in the eyes of others for the validation that should be built from within. One of the greatest traps of rejection is that it makes us believe we're defective, that something is wrong with us. But who set that standard? Since when did fitting into mediocrity become an achievement? Since when did being authentic become a mistake? The truth is that most people who criticize your difference do so because they can't stand their own. They project their fear of not being enough onto you. That's why when someone rejects you, ask yourself, am I betraying myself to avoid their judgment? Am I sacrificing my peace for their approval? The soul was not designed to please everyone. It was designed to express its truth, and that truth won't always be well received, but it will always be necessary, because the world is already full of masks. What it needs are more real people, willing to live without disguise. When you dare to be yourself, even if it means being alone for a while, you begin to attract those who vibrate like you, those who don't need you to explain yourself, those who understand your silence, those who don't fear your intensity because they've walked the same depths. But that connection only happens when you stop diluting yourself to be accepted. Acceptance is an illusion if it requires you to stop being you. The price is too high. The freedom of being authentic, on the other hand, is priceless. Because when you allow yourself to be you, without asking for permission or apologizing, you stop begging for affection and start receiving respect. And that changes everything. You are not less for not fitting in. You are brave for remaining whole in a world that rewards the opposite. Every time you choose your truth over the comfort of fitting in, you grow stronger. Every time you say no to what betrays you, you move forward. Every time you embrace yourself instead of seeking refuge in others' validation, you build an inner fortress no one can tear down. So today, look at yourself with new eyes, not as someone who has been rejected, but as someone who has had the courage not to betray themselves, as someone who has paid the price of authenticity in a world of appearances, and who, despite it all, continues to choose truth. Your worth does not depend on being accepted. Your worth lies in not betraying yourself, even if that means walking alone. Because the solitude that comes from integrity is far more dignified than the company that demands you become someone else. And you are no longer here to pretend. You are here to be. If you've made it this far, it's because you're ready to stop forcing yourself to fit in where you don't belong. Subscribe and comment, I deserve to belong without betraying myself, to affirm your commitment to an authentic and free life. This is only the first step toward an existence where you don't need to pretend to be valued. When you reach the 9th lesson, you'll discover a revelation that could transform how you relate to the world. Don't miss it. It could be the truth your soul has been waiting for. Let's continue. 7th lesson, not fitting in is the first step toward leading. Many dream of leading, of influencing, of leaving a mark, but few accept the true price that comes with it. Being misunderstood, being different, feeling isolated in a world that celebrates conformity. If you've ever felt out of place, this lesson is for you, because within that feeling of not fitting in may lie the seed of something much greater, your ability to lead with truth. History is full of men and women who, before becoming figures of reference, were rejected. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, yes, but he was also a solitary philosopher. Surrounded by power, he sought meaning in his private meditations. Not everyone understood his depth. Some wanted him colder, more ruthless, but he chose to lead from virtue, not domination, and that made him different. Being stoic is, in essence, choosing a path that is not always in fashion. It is prioritizing character over appearance, coherence over approval. And when you do that, when you stop trying to fit in and begin to live by your principles, something inevitable happens. You separate from the crowd. And yes, that hurts. At first it feels like loneliness, like emotional exile, but over time it becomes clarity, and that clarity is exactly what true leaders need. Epictetus didn't lead armies or rule empires. He was a slave, but his thinking transformed generations. How? By refusing to live as a victim, by refusing to fit into the mold of his time. Instead of seeking pity, he cultivated wisdom. Instead of protesting, he taught inner freedom, and that made him a quiet yet eternal leader. Many believe that leadership is about having followers, but true leadership is born when you dare to be yourself, even if no one applauds, when you stand firm amid criticism, when you choose what's right, even if it costs you relationships, status, or comfort. A leader is not someone who has power over others, but someone who has mastery over themselves. And that can only happen when you stop living to fit in and start living to serve a purpose. Maybe today you feel like you don't fit in with your family, at work, within your social circle, that your thoughts are too deep, that your values are seen as obstacles, that your way of seeing life is met with mockery or silence. Don't lower yourself. Don't dim your light so others feel comfortable in their darkness. Don't water down your message to blend into shallow conversations, because what makes you different today could be exactly what others need tomorrow to wake up. History doesn't remember those who adapted without question. It remembers those who broke the mold, who walked alone but with conviction, who were ridiculed before they were admired, who, even without fitting in, continued to speak their truth. That's your mission if you feel you don't belong. Don't silence your truth. Don't stop building, even if it means doing it alone. There's a kind of solitude that isn't emptiness, but a prelude. The solitude of someone preparing something great. The one who can't find someone to share their ideas with, because their ideas are ahead of their time. That solitude is uncomfortable, but sacred. It is the space where true leaders are forged, where character is tempered, where convictions are solidified. Seneca knew this well. He was exiled, slandered, isolated. But he never renounced his thinking. He never diluted his philosophy to be liked. He never changed his essence to be accepted again. And today, centuries later, his voice is still alive. Because the one who leads from the soul leaves marks that time cannot erase. You can do it too. You don't need a title or a position or a massive audience. You only need the courage to be yourself when everything around you pressures you not to be. You need the strength to stand firm when being different hurts, because that pain is part of the process. It's the proof that you're breaking chains, that you're stepping out of the mold, that you're choosing the narrower but nobler path. When you understand this, you stop seeing your difference as a flaw. You begin to see it as a mission. You no longer ask, why don't I fit in? But what was I made different for? And that question takes you to places most people never dare to go. Inward, toward your soul, toward your truth. Real leadership doesn't begin with followers. It begins with solitude, with discomfort, with nights where you wonder if it's worth it. And yes, it is. Because when you lead from authenticity, you inspire without realizing it. You transform just by existing. And that's something no applause can buy. If today you feel like you don't fit in, that people look at you strangely, judge you, don't understand you, smile. Because you're on the path of the brave, the ones who don't need a reserved seat, they build their own table. The ones who don't accept borrowed truths, they forge their own thinking. The ones who don't wait to be chosen, they choose themselves. Remember this, not fitting in is the first step toward leading. It's the sign that you're ready to stop following and start guiding. And if your path is true to your soul, sooner or later, others will follow. Because authenticity is contagious. And truth, though uncomfortable, always finds an echo in brave hearts. Keep going, persevere, don't yield, don't fit in, lead. 8th lesson, stop trying to belong at all costs. There comes a quiet, intimate moment when you realize you've spent years, maybe your whole life, trying to fit into molds that were never designed for you, making titanic efforts to adapt, smile, please, perform, be useful, faking enthusiasm where there's only emptiness, adjusting the way you speak, think, dress, and feel, just to be accepted. And for what? To feel even more alone among others. It's in that moment when your soul can no longer tolerate disguises that this Stoic lesson is born. To stop seeking to belong at all costs is not resignation, it is liberation. From a young age, we're taught that being part of a group is synonymous with personal worth. We're rewarded when we obey, when we imitate, when we don't question, but no one teaches us how to be at peace with not fitting in. No one prepares us for the loneliness that comes with being ourselves. And without that preparation, we search for belonging like a castaway searches for land, desperately. The problem is that this search leads us to places we're not meant to be, to relationships that don't nourish us, to environments where authenticity is punished, to dynamics where, in order to be accepted, you have to betray yourself a little more each day. Epictetus said, "You will never be free until you learn to be yourself." And that's the heart of this lesson. The price of fitting in is often your own freedom. It's the slow, painful amputation of your essence in the name of acceptance that isn't even real. Stoicism does not reject community. On the contrary, it deeply values it, but it distinguishes between community and conformity, between belonging and dissolving. The Stoic sage does not seek approval, he seeks coherence. And if being coherent means walking alone for a while, he does so without complaint, because he knows that true loneliness is not being without people, it's being without yourself. When you stop chasing external acceptance, something profound happens. You begin to return to yourself. You remember your values, your ideas, your silences. You realize how much you've kept quiet not to disturb, how much you've tolerated just to avoid exclusion, how many times you've accepted emotional crumbs out of fear of being alone. And it's there, in that return home, that true transformation begins. Because you're no longer seeking to belong in order to fill a void. You begin to build from the fullness of being who you truly are. Marcus Aurelius expressed it clearly. The best revenge is to be unlike the one who wronged you. Not to impose your difference, but to honor it, to protect what you are from the noise of a world that wants you to be like everyone else. Not out of malice, but out of fear, because your authenticity reminds them of what they've repressed. Every time you pretend to be accepted, you abandon your soul a little. Every time you censor yourself out of fear of judgment, you move away from your peace. And at the end of the road, the emptiness you feel is not because of loneliness. It's because of disconnection from yourself. You can't expect to feel whole if you're living in disguise. You can't find peace if everything in you is being forced. You can't form real connections if what you're showing isn't real. Stopping the desperate search for belonging doesn't mean isolating yourself. It means changing the direction of the search. Instead of looking outward, you start looking inward. And from that inner truth, you open yourself to connecting with those who don't want edited versions of you, but your essence. Stoicism teaches that what matters is not the quantity of connections, but their quality. That you don't need to be understood by everyone, just by a few who truly listen. That you don't need widespread approval, but rather self-respect. It's a hard lesson because it means losing some relationships, some environments, some compliments. But it's also a luminous lesson because what comes after is real, it's deep, it's yours. So be still. Ask yourself, where am I pretending just to fit in? What parts of me am I hiding out of fear of being judged? How many times have I abandoned my principles just to feel like I belong? And then, with courage, take the first step. Stop trying to belong where you must betray yourself. Begin to belong to yourself. Because only when you stop chasing acceptance do you discover that true community can't be forced. It's found. And to find it, you must first dare to be. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will stay. But the ones who do when they truly see you, those are your real tribe. If this message is helping you understand that not fitting in is not a flaw but a sign of authenticity, subscribe and join this space where we embrace difference, cultivate inner strength, and build a place for souls that no longer want to pretend just to be accepted. Ninth lesson: your tribe will find you when you are true to yourself. There comes a moment in life when you realize you've spent far too long trying to fit in. You've changed the way you speak, dress, and think. You've silenced your opinions, faked enthusiasm, tolerated empty conversations and diminishing glances, all in the hope of not ending up alone. And yet, you feel alone. That's the first sign that something deep within is misaligned. When you're surrounded by people but feel like you're with no one. When you laugh with others but inside you're fading. When every social interaction becomes a performance, a small sacrifice of your truth for a crumb of validation. The worst part of not fitting in isn't being outside the group, it's being inside it and still feeling invisible. But here's a hard and necessary truth: maybe it was never your tribe. And that realization, as painful as it may be, is a form of liberation. For years we've confused belonging with forced fitting. We were taught that being accepted by others equates to personal worth, that only by being part of something external would we find inner peace. But no one told us that when you force yourself into a place that isn't yours, you become a stranger to yourself. You're not here to fit in with everyone, you're here to be you. And when you're true to yourself, when you refuse to keep betraying yourself to please others, something powerful happens. The masks fall away. You can no longer keep up appearances. You can't keep smiling when something doesn't resonate with you. You can't stand pretending to care about what bores you or to feel comfortable in places that lack soul. At that point you start losing people. Friends who weren't truly friends. Bonds that only existed because you were playing a role. Spaces where you were accepted only as a watered-down version of yourself. And it hurts. It hurts deeply. But within that loss begins a quiet and transformative gain, because what remains is real, what stays is yours, and what comes after is your true tribe. The tribe of the soul doesn't come when you're begging for acceptance. It doesn't show up when you're pretending. It doesn't appear while you're in disguise. It arrives when you shine from your core, unapologetically, your intensity, your depth, your unique way of seeing the world fully intact. And this is where Stoicism becomes a guide. Epictetus taught that we must not place our worth in the opinion of others, that the wise person lives according to their nature, not the expectations of their environment. Once you understand this, you stop worrying about fitting in, because you realize that what truly matters isn't that everyone accepts you, but that you don't reject yourself. Seneca said, "It's not that we have little time, but that we waste much of it." How much time have you wasted trying to fit in? How much energy have you poured into empty relationships? How many opportunities have you let pass just to avoid discomfort, just to avoid being too much you? But enough. Today you can choose to live differently. Today you can make a pact with yourself. Stop forcing what doesn't resonate and start making space for what does. You don't need thousands of people around you. You just need a few who see your soul and say, "I recognize you. You are not alone." And if today you have no one like that, don't despair. Because your tribe arrives when you're ready to receive it in truth. Sometimes it takes time, because first you must empty yourself of all that is false. You must walk through the desert of authentic solitude so that later the oasis of genuine connection can appear. Your tribe doesn't ask you to change. Your tribe inspires you to be more of yourself. It doesn't make you feel like a burden. It makes you feel like you matter. It doesn't judge your quirks. It celebrates your uniqueness. That tribe exists, but it won't find you while you're still hiding behind a domesticated version of yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best way to avenge yourself is not to be like those who hurt you. And the best way to heal the wound of not fitting in is to stop trying to fit into places that don't want all of you." Faithfulness to your essence is the signal life needs to send you aligned souls, people who don't want to mold you, but to walk beside you. So let me ask you, are you being true to yourself, or are you trading your truth for a bit of belonging? It's hard to stand firm when you don't fit into the superficial, but it's also the first step toward a deeper life. Don't fear being alone for a while. Don't fear the emptiness that comes from letting go of what's false. Don't fear walking alone, because that path, though solitary at first, will lead you to those who also walk barefoot, with awakened souls. The feeling of not belonging is a compass. It's telling you to seek something more honest, more authentic, more you. Don't ignore it. Listen and keep walking, because your true tribe is looking for you too, and they will find you when you find yourself first. That's not loneliness, that's freedom, that's truth, and that is the beginning. 10th lesson, not fitting in is the fertile ground for growth. There are moments in life that feel like curses, but over time you discover they were the very soil where your growth began. Moments when you felt rejected, excluded, out of place. Moments that hurt so deeply they marked your story. In those moments, you asked yourself what was wrong with you, why no one seemed to understand you, what you were doing wrong to be the different one in a world that demands conformity. And without realizing it, you began to carry that difference like guilt, like a burden you had to hide to survive. You looked in the mirror wondering what you could change to be accepted. Maybe if you were more extroverted, lighter, more normal, everything would be easier. Maybe if you faked enthusiasm for things you didn't care about, laughed at jokes that didn't amuse you, silenced your depth to avoid making others uncomfortable. Maybe then you could fit in, but fitting in like that was breaking you inside. And here's what no one told you in time. That pain you felt for not fitting in, it was a seed that doesn't sprout just anywhere, a seed that needs dry soil, rejection, emptiness, because that barren ground where you felt alone was also the exact place where your inner strength began to grow. Marcus Aurelius said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Not fitting in is that, a stone in the road that seems like an obstacle, but is precisely the starting point for your real development. When you don't fit in, you're forced to look inward. You can no longer rely on external approval. You can't build your identity on others' opinions. You begin searching inside for what you can't find outside. And that, though painful, is awakening. That's the deepest paradox of personal growth. You grow not when you're celebrated, but when you're left alone. Because solitude reveals what social noise hides. It forces you to face yourself. And if you don't abandon yourself, you rebuild. Stoicism teaches that the worth of a person doesn't depend on circumstances, but on how one chooses to respond to them. Not fitting in is a circumstance. Painful, yes, but not a sentence. It's an opportunity to cultivate virtue, character, temperance. Epictetus was a slave. He never fit into Roman aristocracy, but that didn't stop him. He used his marginal position to develop wisdom, self-mastery, philosophy. His greatness didn't come from privilege, but from exclusion. It was at the edge where he discovered his center, and you can do the same. That feeling of being too different, too deep, too sensitive can become your greatest virtue if you stop seeing it as a flaw. Not fitting in is a sign that you weren't made for the superficial. It's an invitation to create something bigger, truer, more yours. Because while others settle into the established, you dare to question it. While others adapt to belong, you choose to remain true to yourself. And even if that leaves you out for a while, it's also what allows you to grow from within. There is no real growth without discomfort. No wisdom without emptiness, no authenticity without risk. And that risk you've taken, not pretending, not forcing yourself, not betraying your nature, is what's turning you into someone solid, deep, free, because you no longer need approval, you no longer need to fit in, you just need to be. Spiritual, emotional, and philosophical growth happens outside your comfort zone, and nothing pushes you further out than feeling like you don't belong. But also, there's no better place to find your truth than that. Suffering from not fitting in is common. Growing because of it is a choice. So if today you find yourself in that dry, lonely, misunderstood place, don't despair. You're in your fertile ground. You're at the threshold of something important. You're right where life needed you to begin your true evolution. And when the time to bloom arrives, you'll do so with deep roots, with the certainty that your authenticity was never a flaw, but a promise. That everything that hurt, everything that made you feel strange, everything that isolated you, was preparing the soil of your soul for something greater. You weren't born to fit in, you were born to grow. And for that, sometimes you have to be alone. But never again confuse solitude with defeat. It's the beginning, the start of a life that, this time, will truly be yours. If you've made it this far, it's because a part of you is tired of pretending everything is fine, because you can no longer bear smiling in photos where you don't belong, joining conversations that don't nourish you, or forcing yourself to fit into spaces that only deepen your emptiness. You've carried the weight of your difference like a burden. You've felt the judging eyes, the excluding words, the silence that hurts more than any insult. And despite all of that, you're still here, listening, reflecting, breathing deeply while something inside you shifts, stirs, awakens. And that says a lot. Because to reach this point, you had to endure a world that tried to shape you, dull you, dim your light. You had to withstand the pressure to fit in at all costs, to dissolve yourself into acceptability, to disappear into the ordinary. You had to pretend it didn't hurt, even when it was breaking you a little more each time you betrayed yourself. But now you know. Now you understand that not fitting in is not a tragedy. It's a sign that your soul didn't come here to repeat patterns, but to carve paths. A sign that your uniqueness is not a flaw, but a lighthouse. That the discomfort you feel in certain places, with certain people, in certain dynamics, is your inner wisdom whispering, this is not your place. The world has taught you to chase belonging as if it were the goal, but Stoicism reminds you that the real goal is not to fit in, but to be whole, to be true to yourself, to be consistent, even if that distances you from the norm. Because the wise don't search for a tribe. Tribe finds them when their coherence becomes unshakable. And that is the invitation I want to close this session with. Stop adjusting yourself to spaces that shrink you. Stop silencing your truth to maintain a peace that isn't peace, but resignation. Stop begging for approval when what you truly need is self-respect. Make not fitting in an act of dignity, a gesture of self-love, a firm stance in a world that applauds the superficial but fears the authentic. Maybe for years you thought you were the problem, too intense, too emotional, too quiet, too weird. But what if that difference is exactly what the world needs more of? What if your way of being isn't a mistake but a living reminder that there are other ways to exist? Stoicism teaches us that true freedom doesn't lie in being accepted, but in freeing ourselves from the need to be. That inner calm is more powerful than any external validation. That a soul at peace is worth more than 1,000 likes. You didn't come into this world to please. You came to live with virtue, with clarity, with purpose. And that sometimes means being alone, but never empty. Because the solitude of the wise isn't hollow, it's fertile. It's a space where character, temperance, and authenticity flourish. It's there that you build your inner temple. That serene refuge that depends on no one else. That place where you don't need to pretend to be loved. And if you're here in this community, it's because you're ready to start building it. This Stoic space isn't a trend. It isn't just more content. It's a sanctuary for those tired of living anesthetized, for those unafraid to face their pain and transform it into strength, for those who understand that not fitting in might just be the best news they've ever received. Here, we don't need you to be perfect. We need you to be real. We don't ask you to fit in. We invite you to be. And if this episode resonated with you, if it brought clarity, comfort, or even just a pause amidst the noise, then don't leave in silence. Let us know you're here. Comment below, "My essence is my greatest treasure." That phrase will be your declaration of independence, your personal banner, your commitment to a life of deeper coherence and freedom. And if you want to keep going deeper on this journey, if this space helps you reconnect with yourself, think differently, and heal from within, subscribe. Because each week we create this space as an offering to brave souls, to those who grew tired of fitting in and chose to truly live. This community isn't for the masses. It's for souls, souls that still believe in depth, in reflection, in the power of words and silence. Thank you for being here. Thank you for holding on. Thank you for not giving up. Your journey is just beginning. And even if you feel alone at times, remember, there are others like you. And here, we are finding each other. Your voice matters here. Every reflection strengthens and elevates our community, revealing the true value of each individual and shaping our shared Stoic identity. The most supported comment will be pinned as the banner of this community of Stoic minds. A community that doesn't run from pain, but walks through it with courage, with wisdom, with honor. To enter this Stoic community is to break the chains that limit you and build an inner fortress no one can destroy. Follow us if you never again want to miss a Stoic reflection from us. Remember, every decision shapes your character. In the pinned comment, you'll find 2 paths, and each one exists for a reason. There are decisions that seem small, but change everything. If something inside you shifted while listening to this, don't let it pass. Subscribing isn't just a click, it's a decision to never live asleep again, to walk with awareness, with courage, with purpose. And if you choose to support this space as a member, you're not giving, you're planting. Thanks to you, this flame stays alive. Your presence allows us to keep sharing wisdom in a noisy world, building a community of awake, steady, and free souls. We'll see you in our next session at Stoicism for Winners, where we'll continue exploring the riches of Stoic wisdom applied to modern life. Now, take the opportunity to expand your understanding of Stoicism with the next recommended sessions. Until we meet again, remember, you are the sole owner of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible,